You are live, Chair Kuznick.
Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission for March 1st, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:01. Prior to the roll call, the Assistant City Attorney would like to make an announcement to the Planning Commission regarding the teleconferencing of this meeting. So we turn it over to our Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Alicia Poon.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this Planning Commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over the specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference. And this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Okay, good evening. Tonight we have Commissioner Edwards. Present. Commissioner Marks.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
I am here.
Vice Chair Alpert.
Here.
And Chair Kuznick.
I am here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Poon, if you will continue with the confirming matters for the record.
Thank you again, Chair Kuznick. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. Rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I'll ask all 3. And if the answer is yes to all 3, please say yes and physically raise your hand. Question 1, can you hear me well? Question 2, have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? Question 3, are you satisfied based on facial and voice recognition or otherwise that everyone here representing themselves to be a commission member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be? I'm looking for hands and yeses, please.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Seeing all hands raised and hearing yeses, the record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each commission member present to all 3 questions, that all commission members have indicated they are able to hear each other and these proceedings clearly. And no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would now like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. At this time, will our recording secretary please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. All right, we move to item 4, public comments or written communications. If you wish to speak under public comment, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is taken. You will be unmuted and allotted 3 minutes to speak, after which time you will then be remuted. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda. At this time, it would also be appropriate for members of the audience to request to remove any item or items from the consent calendar, as well as the reasons for why they are requesting to pull these items. However, the decision to remove the items or items is solely at the discretion of the commission. So at this time, we'd like to open public comment and ask our recording secretary if we have any written communication or people wishing to speak.
Thank you. We did not receive any written communication. And at this time, I do not have any hands in the audience.
Very good. Then we will close public comment on items not on the agenda. All right, moving on. Item 5, additions and revisions. There are none. Item 6, the consent calendar. All right, commissioners, this is the time to ask you if you'd like to remove an item from the consent calendar or if there is a motion to approve all the consent items.
Madam Chair, I will move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. We had mover, Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
seconder, Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Alpert
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, feel like I need to go back. Commissioner Wallace, you had your hand up and I was trying to stay to the agenda and I overlooked it. Did I miss something?
No, what I was doing was remembering my days in grade school where we're supposed to raise our hand before we talked. And that was...
Do you still want to talk?
No, I did. I said, I seconded.
Oh, excellent. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I was not committing a procedural faux pas here. Thank you so much. All right, so we have moved on from the consent calendar and we move on to item 7.1, the approval of the minutes. Now we have two sets to approve here. So the first set is the joint meeting of February 15th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? All right, I see
Yeah.
Commissioner Albert.
I'll move adoption of the Planning Commission joint meeting of February 15th minutes.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, so we had mover, Vice Chair Alpert,
Aye.
seconder, Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye,
Thank you.
very good. All right, our next set, item 7.2, minutes from the February 15th regular Planning Commission meeting. Someone like to make a motion? All right,
I
Commissioner
actually have
Edwards?
a comment.
very good.
I would ask that I just have to have it noted for the record that our meeting started at 9:25 because the Planning Commission was engaged in the earlier scheduled meeting with the Housing Advisory Committee.
7:25, correct?
Yeah, it was,
Yes, I'm sorry if I misspoke.
Yes, I think I had that on the minutes. If not, I can go ahead and make that correction.
so your correction is the delay of because of the other meeting.
Correct. It's not simply the start time. It's that the start time of our meeting was delayed because we were in a meeting with the Housing Advisory Committee.
I can make that correction. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Commissioner Albert.
I'll move approval of the minutes as modified on the dais tonight of the Planning Commission meeting of February the 15th.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Very good.
Great, thank you. All right, so we had mover, Vice Chair Alpert.
Aye.
Thank you. Seconder, Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye, and thank you, Commissioner Edwards, for bringing that point up.
and Chair Kuznick.
Yes. Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, we move on to item number 8, continued items after the closing of public hearing. There are none. And item 9, continued items, open public hearing. There are no items. Okay. Moving on to item 10, there are no new items. Item 11, no, there are no new non-public hearing action items. Therefore, we get to item 12, 12.1, the study session, Crow Canyon Commons, North Commuter Ramone specific plan amendment. And we have a staff report by our senior planner, Miss Cindy Yee. Or
So you know.
perhaps it's Mr.
Ryan
Driscoll.
Driscoll. Yeah, he'll be providing an overview of this item, and then we have the applicant and their team here to do a presentation as well.
Very good. Should have known, Ryan.
It's
My
okay.
apologies.
Nope, it's okay. So good evening, planning commissioners. Give me just a moment while I share my screen.
If we could also promote the applicants team as well.
Yes, I am working on that right now.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
All right, perfect. So this is an item, a study session item for the Crow Canyon Commons North Commuter Ramone specific plan amendment application. So the Crow Canyon Commons Shopping Center is located at the corner of Crow Canyon Road and Commuter Ramone. It's 16 parcels shown here on the aerial photo on Crow Canyon Place. And there's about 250,000 square feet of tenant space in the center. The general plan designation is mixed use for the subject parcels and properties, and it's in the North Commuter Ramone specific plan. This is the land use diagram from the specific plan. There's actually two land use designations. About 3/4 of the area to the east is in the Commons Mixed Use or TCMU designation, and about 1/4 to the west is in the DRMU or Destination Retail Mixed Use designation. So the proposal for the specific plan amendment, I'll go over here, but the applicant will also provide a little more detail. But the proposal would change the designation for the Crow Canyon Commons Shopping Center to a new land use district from the TCMU and DRMU designations to a new designation that they're calling CCMU or Crow Canyon Mixed Use. And a note from staff here, if the application does continue to move forward, we'll need to provide a new designation, a name for this new land use district, as a CCMU is already taken in the city. It's the City Center Mixed Use Zoning District that we have. So in this, regardless of that though, in this new land use district, it would allow up to 40% non-retail land uses in the district. And it would establish a more streamlined review process for a number of land use designations. The more streamlined review process would be administrative in nature and would be a shortened review time. And it would also be a distinct process separate from the special economic findings that are in the zoning ordinance, section D4-38. That section currently limits shopping centers to a maximum 25% non-retail on the ground floor, and to exceed that, they have special economic findings. The proposal would also amend the North Commuter Ramone specific plan table 4.3 with various existing land uses and new land uses. And as I mentioned, it would provide a streamlined review process for some of them. And it would also establish a couple new land use districts for electric vehicle service station and neighborhood e-commerce fulfillment center. Staff's also provided an updated table of all the tenants in the Crow Canyon Commons. So currently there's about 6% non-retail land uses in the center. That includes office, medical, and studio. And if you include the existing banks in that calculation for non-retail, it bumps up to about 17%. And there's about 7.5% vacant space currently in the shopping center. And the applicants provided a fiscal analysis to support the proposed 40% non-retail standard, which they'll also be able to give a little more information on. So the recommendations to receive the report and also the presentation shortly here by the applicant, take public comment, and provide comments to the applicant and staff on the proposed application. This is as an early feedback for this specific plan amendment before we go through the formal public hearing process for this application. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I can take any questions if you have questions for me. And if you don't, we'll move on to the applicant's presentation.
Commissioners, any question for Mr. Driscoll before we hear from the applicant?
I do have a quick question. I'd like to understand how that 40% is calculated. The materials that we have suggest that it's the gross ground floor area of the shopping center. And what I'd like to better understand is, how do we count land where we've got, for example, a retail use on the ground floor and an office and or residential improvements in the upper stories. How would that particular area be calculated in or out of the 40%?
Yeah, I mean, so the proposal is for 40%, and some of that would be subject to the amendment with the proposal here. But I can speak to, I think, the existing zoning ordinance regulation and how we calculate the existing regulation is looks at the ground floor area, and that's limited to 25% today. And so we're not looking at second floor tenant spaces or anything like that with that calculation. So I believe the proposal would be looking only at ground floor space also with the 40%, but the applicant would have to confirm if that's their proposal.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff right at this moment? Okay, so it sounds, I think, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Okay.
And it's for any of the staff that feels that they'd like to answer. A couple of years ago, we did a retail analysis of retailing in the city. And one of the key findings of that analysis was that the area east of the freeway and I think south of Crow Canyon offered the city the best opportunity it has in the long term to attract and keep retail uses. And so my first part of this question is, how does what's being proposed and studied in the Sedway report differ from the analysis? I think it was BAE, but I do not recall exactly who the consultant firm was. But the recommendations that we not only accepted, but the council adopted. It seems to me that if that truly is our best area for preserving retail, and this is the shopping center that it would really occur in, it seems at odds with that study. And so I'm looking for staff's comments about that.
I think I can start with the responses. Yes, you're correct. I think they referred to it as the gravity side of the freeway.
Yes.
So again, it looks at potential in terms of where the rooftops and accessibility for retail is. And this study that was done, and I'll let the applicant expand on it if they feel I'm mischaracterizing it, but it's really looking at it from the standpoint of non-retail versus some vacancy issues and how those would also encourage additional traffic into the center for those retail uses that are remaining. And so their analysis is based on some assumptions that they've made. The economic analysis that was done before was a slightly different context, and not to mention it was under different circumstances. We are also going to be looking at economic impacts as part of our general plan update, and so we're looking at this issue in some detail, and this is just a slightly earlier view at that issue.
Lauren, I thank you for the answer. I have to say it gives me some pause to consider switching what we have in our zoning ordinance and allowing this, only because if the gravity side of the freeway truly is our best hope, then I'm not sure what we might be giving away. But the second part of my question is, it was also my understanding that because this was the best area for retailing, the Planning Commission and the council understood that there was not going to be housing in the Crow Canyon Commons Shopping Center. It was one of several, not all, but one of several shopping centers that were not zoned to allow housing, or were not going to allow housing. And when I look at page 117, packet page 117 of the staff report, in the font that is colored blue, in the last couple of sentences, it reads, secondary residential, office, studio, and other service uses are also encouraged on upper levels, as with the DRMU and the TCMU alternative development setbacks associated with ground floor residential and flex space uses may be allowed, etc. Ground floor residential may be allowed. Now that seems a different.
Yeah, I think there's a clarification that needs to be made is as part of the economic element that amended the general plan and removed mixed use standards off of some of the properties. The area north of Crow Canyon's road was designated as commercial mixed use, which no longer allows for housing. The specific plan to the south of Crow Canyon Road remains as general plan mixed use, and the specific plan is the implementation tool, which allows for residential uses. So a portion of the center could be developed as residential as it exists today.
I have to tell you, I have a distinctly different understanding and recollection of that. And I wonder when other commissioners speak what their understanding of it is.
Well, if I'm mistaken, we can discuss it, but that's how I recall it. And I don't know if Debbie has a different take on that, but again, I'm looking at, we can look to the general plan designations that exist today.
If I recall, the economic analysis the economic element update, there we go, removed housing from Gateway Center, Diablo Plaza, and the shops at Bishop Ranch. And those were the three primary centers. It was not removed from the Crow Canyon specific plan area, or from the North Commuter. Yeah, at the Crow Canyon Commons Center.
But the area north of Crow.
Very north of Magnolia Square,
right.
But not the shopping center itself. And it does have a general plan designation of mixed use, which does allow housing. I believe the consultant, the applicant and their team will be speaking to that tonight also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions for staff at this time, Ryan, would you like to introduce the applicant and their team so we can hear from them?
Yes, I believe we have Stuart. I have a small screen here. Hold on. There's everyone. Stuart McDonald, Mike DiGeronimo, and Travis Brooks here. Not sure who's going to be speaking first, but I do have the presentation for the applicant that I can provide and move forward on the slides for you.
Great.
And I'll share my screen to do that. Just a second.
Stuart, are you going to start?
Yes, this is Stuart. I will start if you can hear me okay.
I do hear you. We hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name's Stuart McDonald of Federal Realty, and I'm joined tonight by Michael DiGeronimo and Travis Brooks of Miller Star, who are land use advisors for this planning application. Commissioners and planning staff, we appreciate the opportunity to appear before you tonight to initiate a conversation about the future of Crow Canyon Commons Shopping Center. First, I always feel like I need to provide a little bit of background for commissioners that may not know us very well, as some of the other commercial property owners in the city, like Sunset, who frequently appear before commission. Federal has the sound of a large institution or government entity, but we are in fact simply a publicly traded REIT, real estate investment trust, with a specific focus on retail shopping centers. If we can flip to the next slide, please. As a company, we have retail market knowledge gained by working with most major national brands across multiple properties. In addition to our broad reach, we also believe strongly in the local touch. We try to be the exact opposite of an absentee landlord. I work at Crow Canyon at least once a week, usually on Wednesdays, and the property manager is on site several times a week as well. Why? Well, we want to understand and watch over the asset, and the way that's done is by simply being there. We want to know when the parking lot's full. We want to visit the shops and eat at the restaurants. We want to understand who's doing well and who needs a little extra help. Part of that, is our long-term commitment to desirable locations. We picked up this property in 2005, and our basic strategy throughout our portfolio is value creation through re-tenanting as we see appropriate and incremental property upgrades along the way. Next slide, please. This is just a slide directly out of our annual report. I like it because it sort of summarizes our business and our spread pretty well on which markets we're in. We try to be in what we believe are the very best retail markets throughout the US. In the Bay Area here, we have 8 properties, some of which you may have seen. East Bay Bridge, which is on I-80 as you're getting onto the Bay Bridge towards San Francisco. There's the Westgate Center in San Jose, as well as Santana Row in San Jose. Have a handful of properties in Los Angeles County, City of Los Angeles, and San Diego County as well. And then you can really see that sort of the epicenter of our business is where we started in the Mid-Atlantic region in Washington, DC, and up north through Boston. Dropping south to Miami, and then representing the Midwest, we have Chicago. Let's see, next slide, please. So this is, the center in question, Crow Canyon Commons. This aerial view I like just because it really illustrates, I think, a lot about what the property is about. You can see a number of pad sites along Crow Canyon Road. You can see towards the bottom of the screen here, this large dumbbell effect. That's really the large white rectangular roofs that represent the big box retail that at times has been a struggle for us here. At present, Rite Aid, Sprouts, Total Wine, and Ace Hardware occupy those large boxes. Next slide, please. This is really where we get into the meat of the discussion. As staff reported, the center is currently at about 7.5% of the gross leasable areas being vacant. In addition, we have about 3% of the GLA of what we call on the watch list. That's why we're front and center on the property on a regular basis, as we really want to understand which retailers are doing well, which aren't, which need a little extra help. And the 3% comprises retailers that may just not make it. The good news is that list shrunk a little bit post-pandemic here, but unfortunately, the watch list turned into some actual vacancies that contribute to the 7.5% you see there. And then I'd also like to talk a bit on this slide just about the big box vacancy impact. As many of you are probably familiar, the Osh departure left a large hole in the center for 2.5 years. That contributed to 11% vacancy. And then, next up would certainly be concerns over Rite Aid. We've been in discussions with them. They are not interested in continuing on. They'll be gone Q1 of 2026. Right now is the time to be planning for that vacancy. There's really only a handful of retailers nationally that would be able to pick up that side of the space in this market. At this point in time, we have not seen interest from any of those retailers. I'd also like to point out that there's a direct corollary between what's happening with that, what happened with Osh, what's potentially going to happen with Rite Aid, and the Westgate Shopping Center in San Jose that has a 37,000 square foot space that is sat vacant for 3 years because a major retailer decided it was cheaper for them to just close up shop and continue to pay the lease for the remaining 3 years rather than stay open. So these larger formats are a real problem. By way of comparison, Federal Realty, which really fights back vacancies at all costs because we think that the effects on the center are tremendously destructive. Typically, national average right now for vacancies in shopping centers is about 6.5% in fourth quarter 2021. So you can see Crow Canyon's is not too far off of that number. But for Federal Realty's California portfolio, we like to keep it at 5%, which is where it currently is. So we're 2.5 points off that, with potentially another three points of risk. Next slide, please. So this is just some recent shots. Last month here on the center, this is formerly Starbucks. They vacated fourth quarter of 2020, and then to the right is the Zachary's Pizza space. They vacated the third quarter of 2021. Next slide. Yeah, and then this portion of the center was just sort of this U-shaped courtyard adjacent to Total Wine, where we now have one medical. Has persistent low occupancies, and sort of the deeper reaches of the courtyard suffers from sort of typical retail geometry issues we see now of just low visibility, parking not as convenient as you'd like it to be, just poor exposure generally. One medical, which is out there at the corner, is sort of a bright spot for us, and we think there is promise for more medical uses in retail centers. Next slide. So the image to the left really is sort of the sleepiest side of the property. You can see there's no signs up. There's some of this is surge space occupied by JC Salon intermittently. Pinky's Nail Salon is on the far side. The rest of this is vacant. And, you know, it really suffers from poor visibility due to sort of a truncated access because Crow Canyon Place terminates at a cul-de-sac. There's really very little reason for a lot of traffic to be coming back through here. Next slide, please. So, you know, this is just headlines that we've all seen over the years. One of the points that I'd like to make here is just that this is not a pandemic phenomena. The restructuring of retail we saw beginning in 2017, really picking up steam. It certainly accelerated during COVID, but we don't see it ending with the end of COVID. It will certainly, you know, trickle off a bit, but these sort of structural issues of what's happened with retailing, the effect of e-commerce, the effect of new platforms for people to get their goods, really is here to stay. It's our belief. Next slide. Centers where we've had problems, like this center, a center in El Segundo where we had similar problems. You know, we consult, you know, real estate economists to look at these things, try and understand the market fundamentals and what's happening, and how we come up with a plan to correct the situation. Really, you know, we agree with the findings from the Sedway report. In response to Commissioner Mark's questions about that and the gravity side, we are certainly happy to take those questions back to the consultant and have them address them. And if there's any other questions on sort of their economic conclusions, they are not on the phone tonight, but we are happy to take those comments back to them and let them respond. Lynn Sedway's, you know, respected economist, has been doing this for a while. She has an MBA from Haas School of Business and Urban Economics and Real Estate. She's done work for Sunset Development down the street. So happy to have any of those questions fielded and addressed. So on this, you know, the other thing that we would just like to add, and it was a conclusion that Sedway had found, and we had similar findings in the property in El Segundo, where we launched a successful campaign to have the city reconsider their same sort of criteria on the sales tax generating uses. There is an opportunity for some of these non-retail uses to help mitigate the negative effects of the vacancies and help bring some additional traffic to these centers. Next slide, please. So, you know, our concerns going forward really is this: we have a shrinking pool of creditworthy retailers we're working with, as is all retailers and all shopping centers across the country. This is not unique to San Ramon. We see it everywhere throughout our portfolio. The vacancies, which obviously as a landlord, we're concerned about revenue loss, but that's, solely our concern, but it does cause harm to other tenants in the center because of foot traffic. It further reduces the marketability of the center. It could trigger co-tenancy clauses, and it just creates a snowball effect where other tenants are impacted by having the vacancies adjacent to them. We also feel that there's really just at this point not enough flexibility to create the right complementary uses to keep the center vibrant. And we think that more service uses will help bring back tenants and bring back people to the center to help populate it during the daytime. And then the other point here that I'd like to bring up, and it was sort of brought up in Ryan's presentation, is to try and streamline approval processes. My leasing and broker colleagues like to, use dramatic terms, but they say time kills deals, which, on a certain level it does, particularly when it comes to smaller retailers who really do not have the wherewithal to stand for a long process of hiring architects, doing studies, doing multiple iterations to get through various approvals. And so we are proposing to streamline some of that to allow more by right uses. And further, just, in our conversations with our friends down the street at City Center, we really believe that there's an opportunity here, given their resets and their adjustments on how their land use is being adjusted, to allow both centers to be successful, that we aren't both competing and trying to do the same thing. There certainly have the market at this point on the lifestyle and the positive, higher end retail. We're not going to be competing with them, but we can provide complementary service uses that we think will be a real benefit and serve the community. And with that, if Travis is, next slide, please. If Travis is there, maybe you can just sort of briefly summarize what's on this last sheet, which may overlap a bit with what Ryan already talked about.
Great, thanks, Stuart. My name is Travis Brooks, one of the land use attorneys working with the applicant on this project. I will just briefly go over the proposed changes that the changes that we're proposing to the specific plan. Most of these points Ryan already went over, so I won't belabor them. But the first big change is we're requesting a change of the specific plan land use district designation of the center from two separate designations. Right now, the eastern portion is designated the Commons mixed use. The western portion is designated downtown destination retail mixed use, and both of those separate designations have slightly different permitted and conditionally permitted uses and slightly different land use regulations. So this would really sort of create a cohesive and uniform land use district designation for the site. We're also proposing, as Ryan mentioned, an increase in the allowed percentage of non-retail uses on the ground floor of the site from 25% to 40%. As Ryan mentioned, currently under the zoning code in retail centers, to include more than 25% ground floor retail, you have to get either a use permit or a minor use permit, and 6 separate economic findings have to be considered, which are fairly difficult to make. And that creates a fairly onerous process. It takes a lot of time. So we're proposing, in response to market forces, to increase that allowed percentage of non-retail uses on the ground floor to 40%. We're also proposing slightly reducing the approval level for assembly uses versus what is currently required at the site. So for example, daycare uses, health clubs, civic uses, instead of a conditional use permit, which requires planning commission approval at a hearing, these uses would now require a minor use permit, which is a staff level discretionary approval. Currently, medical clinic and medical and professional office uses are not allowed on the ground floor under the specific plans use matrix. We would propose a small adjustment to that use matrix to allow for medical clinic and medical professional uses on the ground floor. We're also, in response to market demands, current demands, and what we perceive to be future market demands, we're also introducing a couple of new uses and use categories. So by right, in our new district designation, we're proposing catering and food delivery service, electric vehicle charging with a minor use permit, more assembly type uses, specialized education, training, studio art, dance, martial arts, music instruction, and also last mile e-commerce fulfillment facilities. And with a conditional use permit, we're also proposing a new use, electrical vehicle service. So that a lot of that reiterates what Ryan said, but that's really the core of what we're proposing here. And Stuart, I believe that's our last slide, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Great. So I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay, very good. Is there, okay, so Ryan, that's it from the applicant.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I know the other gentleman is on and just didn't know if he was going to say something. Okay, at this time, commissioners, do you have questions for the applicant, clarifying questions for the applicant from what you heard? Okay, Commissioner Albert.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick. I had just a couple of questions. First, to clarify, are there any of the pads there that actually have a second floor on them in today's shopping center?
No, they're not.
Okay. So anything that talks about a second floor anticipates some sort of future that doesn't exist today. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, and I think, I would just add to that, based upon, current land uses and density and just what's happening with the center, in my mind, this really ought to be conceived of as ground floor occupancy center, and second floors really make very little sense to be discussing. I mean, I know that ACE has a mezzanine within their space, but the density of land use in this area, just given sort of the suburban nature of the market, is we think this should be conceived of as a ground floor, first floor shopping center.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Second question, you mentioned vacancies of big box stores being problematic for the shopping center, and my assumption is based on the proposed land use changes, you would conclude that if you had more flexibility and the ability to put non-retail, that those big box vacancies would be closed quicker. Is that what I should take away from the presentation so far?
Yeah, it's possible. And one concept that we've sort of kicked around is, demising the big box spaces, with a front of house and a back of house, as a for instance. And we don't know, we would have to have discussions with a tenant about this, but for instance, a use like a catering kitchen or food delivery kitchen doesn't need to be front and center of the so it could be in the back half of a space like Rite Aid, and you could have medical office in the front half, as a for instance, that it would be split in some manner.
Okay,
but,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of gets to the heart of my question is, if Rite Aid wasn't there, what could you do with a big store footprint right now? And I think you answered it. Thank you. And then I made a note that medical use is not allowed. Did I misunderstand what was said during the presentation at some point? And my follow-up question is, if that's true, is One Medical or Mona Lisa Smile considered medical facilities? Are they? I guess the first question is, medical use allowed in the shopping center?
And clarify for the commission, the One Medical did get a minor use permit,
Okay.
And it is allowed there.
Okay, so it was allowed and approved. And then is Mona Lisa considered a medical facility? Smile, I thought it was a dentist, but maybe
It is a dentist, yeah. Offhand, I had to double check the spreadsheet, but yeah, I believe there is a permit for it.
Oh, okay, great. I think that's my questions for now. I'll have comments later.
Okay, great.
And I guess I can clarify, since I raised the second floor medical issue, just looking at the use matrix in the specific plan as it stands right now. So maybe this has been amended, but currently both professional office and medical clinic, lab, and urgent care have a footnote 2 next to them that says use allowed only on the second or upper floor. So I'm not sure if that was a subsequent change or.
Okay.
Just also for clarification, there were interim use provisions that go back to the prior zoning that was in place. And so there are use permit processes that grandfather in some of the prior zoning issues.
Other clarifying questions, commissioners, before we open comment and then have our own discussion? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, I'd like to open up. Sorry, I see a hand. Mr. DiGeronimo.
Yeah, I just wanted, no problem. I just wanted to say that we're really here today asking for the commission's help here, that the problem with retail leasing, and I've been doing this well over 30 years now, is there's a real long lead time between the time a space becomes vacant and the time that the tenant is able to actually occupy the space. Oftentimes your big tenants, you're talking a year or more, and smaller tenants, a lesser amount, but it's just a real long process. And so if federal waited until it became a problem, it's just not going to work. And so that's why we're trying to have this discussion with the Planning Commission now and asking for your assistance in trying to come up with something that works for everybody. And the one thing I do want to point out in the study that we presented, the Segway study, it does show that there's really no decrease in sales tax revenue for the city. So this is it won't have an adverse impact on the city's economics. I think this goes to Commissioner Marks' question, that we're confident that this is not going to make the city less retail. It's just going to respond to market forces. And so we're really looking for your input as a commission as to how do we work together to help solve this problem. That's just, we're seeing it everywhere. It's just a function of e-commerce and the changing world that we're living in. And we're trying to come up with something in conjunction with the city that works for everybody. And then that's why we're hoping to get your input as to, what do we do here to make this work and keep it, keep a good center, work with city center, make it so it's a benefit to the community as a whole. So those are that was my quick thoughts. Thank you for letting me say that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, commissioners, let's go ahead and move on to public comment. So, Madam Recording Secretary, do we have any public comment on this topic?
Thank you. We don't have any written communication or late communication items. However, we can go ahead and move into public comment from the audience. It looks like we do have one hand raised at the moment.
Okay. All right, let's do that.
And Mr. Barr, if you wouldn't mind getting a timer for me, that would be great. We'll put a 3-minute timer up there. And hold on just a moment here. Okay, and we'll go ahead and bring in call-in user one. You can speak whenever you're ready.
Hello, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Welcome.
Okay, so thank you. So now you have heard from the applicant, the staff. I would like to share with you the residents' perspective. I wish every applicant who are allowed to come in our city to be extremely successful and prosperous, because their success and their prosperity contributes to our coffer. So there's really no reason why I would be against them. However, there has to be equity in everyone's quality of life and opportunities for success. When the applicants are trying to make exceptions for them, that already sounds kind of fishy. However, I understand that our world is changing. So I would be happy to give some space for you guys to work with them. However, it should not be at the expense of the residents' quality of life. For example, if they're wishing for you to reduce, up to 50 or 100, parking spaces, that's not acceptable. Or if they're trying to, infringe upon other properties privacy rights, such as no trespassing, no loitering in the name of walking district, that's not acceptable because it's a violation of HOA CCNRs. Now, I also want to address what I just heard, and thank you, Commissioner, who brought up about the medical use. I actually am a little bit confused. I don't know if it's allowed or not allowed, but if it's not allowed, I would like you to please look into foot massaging and general day spa, as well as Chinese herbs, wholesaler stores, which is everywhere in Fremont. And as we continue to bring in more of these affordable housing, we will be bringing in those residents from Fremont or Milpitas or San Francisco, and we will find ourselves in a conflict of quality of life, which I hope you will be wise enough to address now, so it doesn't, end up in court costing us money, or that we all just have to say, I can't deal with this anymore, let's move out, or I wish I never lived here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay. Anybody else?
All right. It looks like that was our only public comments.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and close a public comment on this topic. Thank you, one and all. And so now, commissioners, it is our discussion on and feedback to the applicant. So who shall we call on first? Okay, ladies first. Commissioner Edwards.
You really know how to treat a girl right.
Well, it used to be me, so.
All right, so
now we share the wealth.
Yeah, we can do that. So number one, I want to thank the applicant for coming forward with this kind of incremental approach to Planning Commission approval for some changes that apparently need to be made. And for requesting some kind of high level and general feedback from the commissioners about some options. I firmly believe that a collaborative approach improves this process. I think it improves the process for our citizens, for the commission, and for the developer. And I do really believe that this kind of an approach ultimately yields a faster process and a better project for the city. So taking some, I want to kind of, I think, maybe start with some of the more granular details of the things we've been specifically asked to comment on, and then provide some broader feedback. So we're being asked to consider by right approval for catering and food delivery service businesses. I am not in favor of those uses in this location. It seems to me that those kinds of uses tend to encourage projects like a commissary kitchen, which are not going to have any benefit to activating this area. I do share Mr. Mark's concerns about use changes in this center, which ultimately would deprive the city of what's a very valuable site for retail operations. And I think that once we introduce uses to a site that are not client facing, we lose a lot of that value. I have similar comments for the concept of an e-commerce fulfillment center. I just do not view those kinds of uses as appropriate or a good use of this particular area of land. It's really prime real estate, and any project at this site should be encouraging uses that make which activate the area, create a full pedestrian experience, and really give us a mixed use neighborhood. The site is certainly large enough to do that. I appreciate, the vacancy struggles that we've heard about. I started shopping at the shopping center actually in 1996. I've seen a variety of different big box stores in this site, and I have seen a lot of vacancies over the years. So I think it's incumbent on us as a commission to recognize and acknowledge that our retail sector is changing, which is not to say that retail is dead. I mean, I think that the success that we've seen with the city center project shows us retail is not dead. Destination retail is not dead. But I do think that the more options that the city can make available to improve the use of this site, the better our chances as a city of receiving a really excellent development proposal from this group. And I have said this before, mixed use is mixed use. It's truly mixed. So residential, office, and medical uses do not necessarily exclude retail. So I just, I'll just tell the developer that, and the site owner that I do think that this is prime real estate. I can see why you might have acquired it in 2005. There is a tremendous opportunity here to deliver something really special to this community. And I think that we have an opportunity here to start getting really creative about parking, about the bigger needs of the community. I can see this site be, ground floor retail with some medical office uses on a second floor with residential above. I can see a ground floor grocery store in this location. I could see a ground floor drugstore that's supported very, very strenuously by residents above. I can see that happening, and I can see that being very good for the retails. I can see that being very good for the residents. And frankly, I think it would be good for the retail uses across the street as well. And those are my comments. So thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you for going first. All right. Gentlemen. Commissioner Alpert, you're next.
Thank you. I have a few comments. Maybe it's partially also directed to the Planning Commission and the city staff as much as the applicant. And I want to thank the applicant for trying to come up with a solution they think will work for this. But like Commissioner Marks, back in 2017, the study then said the center's central location and experienced institutional owners make it one of the most viable retail centers over the long term. And I can that resonates really quickly how much we worked with the retail consultant BAE at the time and identified this as one of the most desirable shopping centers. However, renovation and some redesign was probably called for, and they did call out that it will, as a publicly traded REIT, they'll need to justify any incremental return on capital when making these improvements. But with that said, 25, 75, 35, 65, 40, 60, I really don't know for certain if that's a good mix or not. It might be, and it might not only be a good recommendation, it could be an ideal mix. But what I question is, why would we do this for just one shopping center? If it's good for this shopping center, shouldn't it be good for every shopping center in the city? And I think we would be short-sighted to create another modification to a specific plan that has long outlived its probable use. We just spent months going through a specific plan amendment for BR6, and what we heard repeatedly is that plan, as currently contemplated back in 2012 when it was adopted, that world doesn't exist anymore. And that big plate retail and everything else that we envisioned for that area just doesn't make sense anymore. So what I would like, before we start tweaking yet another specific plan, is really strongly consider whether it makes sense to continue to keep this plan alive or not, or should we collapse this shopping center into how we treat all of the other shopping centers? Because it's not just one shopping center we'd be changing, it would be setting precedents for every shopping center, because if it's good for this shopping center, why wouldn't it be good for the marketplace, or why wouldn't it be good for Diablo Plaza or any of the other ones? So that's really one of my comments. My other comment is, why should we be doing this right now? We're currently in a, I would say, epic struggle to identify housing versus retail, and all of that is going to be addressed in the general plan amendment that we're working on right now. I would hate to spend any time tweaking and modifying this plan before we've completed the larger task ahead of us, which is evaluating the role of retail in the city as we develop housing opportunity sites. When it does come back, I would like the city staff and/or a city hired consultant to evaluate the technical analysis that was provided to justify the changes. I've tried to get through it, and I did read it several times, and it is beyond my skill level. So I don't know if it's a finance evaluation, a planning evaluation, a economic development, including EDAC should be looking at this in addition to just us, or bring back BAE to evaluate it, because BAE has a long-time relationship with us. If we decide to go forward, I saw a lot of discrepancies and variances in the land use tables between this plan and the general plan and the zoning ordinance. I think this gives us an opportunity to standardize those tables, even if we decide to maintain a specific plan. The more we can simplify and standardize our land use tables, the better. And then lastly, just some minor things. I think I echo Commissioner Edwards' comments on the two proposed land uses, although I really don't know what they are, because there's no description in them. But, I trust what Commissioner Edwards' experience is with, those two, and that they don't seem to activate the ground floor retail. And then lastly, I don't know that I'm really comfortable with downgrading the approval levels of this shopping center for just these uses. And before we agree to do that, I think we as a commission should have a focused discussion on each of the land uses and discuss why it deserves to be allowed by right, or a minor use permit, or a use permit, and not just make changes based on the applicant's recommendation and for one shopping center only. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Alpert. All right, Commissioner Marks, Commissioner Wallace, who's next?
Eric seems to be holding back, so I will go unless he wants to go right now. My comments are going to be more brief than I had thought they would be, because I agree entirely with Commissioner Edwards and Commissioner Alpert. And I want to put on the record, just as the applicant showed us the headlines from some magazines and other publications, in Sunday's New York Times this past Sunday, there's an article in the business section called "A Comeback for Physical Stores." And one of the things they allege is that physical stores, brick and mortars, had a higher percentage of sales than online retailing, which I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know really what that means, but it sounds impressive. And it sounds like, retailing is not really dead. It's a matter of what you're selling and where you're selling it. I do want to say that I think one of the things that we as a city planning commission have to think about that the applicant doesn't is the future needs of residents. They look at it from one point of view. Maybe we look at it from another. And let me clarify that. In the last couple of years, we have approved 4,500 residential units in City Walk. We have approved 404 residential units being constructed by Summerhill, and they're underway right now. We have approved 750 residential units in the San Ramone Village specific plan. And we have RENA obligations that are coming at us that say something like 5,000 new units need to be constructed. If you just assume that that population, that number of people generated with 2.3 persons per household, which I think is the likely number that we now use. I haven't seen the most recent census information, but at 2.3, that's 24,759 more people living in the city. And if it's 2.5, which again, I'm not really sure which of those it was, you have 26,912 new people or more people in the city. That's close to a 30% increase in population. It just doesn't make sense to me to have an increasing number of residents and a decreasing amount of retail. We already suffer from leakage, and it just seems to me we are, by allowing more uses to become non-retail uses, increasing that amount of leakage. And so to me, that's something that as a planning commission, we need to look at. We can't just approve housing and not look at the services that support the housing and the people that are going to live there. And we can't complain about traffic on the roads if we're going to be sending people out to Dublin or Pleasanton or wherever they may go because they can't get what they need right here in town. I want to say that the notion that we need to streamline the process gets a little bit old after a while. Yes, it's important to streamline the planning process. And yes, there are times when public sector planners, of which I was one, and I am as guilty as anybody who ever was, maybe we add roadblocks that are detrimental to a center. But I have to wonder, how helpful is it to the vacancy rate to have a Starbucks and a Pete's competing with each other in the same center, or Ike's and Mr. Pickles competing with each other in the center? I've worked in 5 public jurisdictions, and I've seen this happen time and again. I've seen 2 dry cleaners put into a center. And yes, one of them got killed off. And then we were told the vacancy rate went up. So I wonder, and this is a question that I didn't ask before because it isn't a clarifying question, but I wonder how the applicant responds to a concern that how many learning centers should a shopping center have? The reason we have D434 or D438, whatever it is, was in response to the fact that the commission and the city council both felt that we were over represented with repetitive land uses within the same shopping center. And so raising the percentage by 15% makes me wonder, and again, I've worked in a city where we did this, where we said you can only have one of this and only one of that. That doesn't seem consistent with the history of this city. That doesn't seem like something this city would generally be comfortable with. But it worries me. When the name of the game is if they can pay the rent, that's good enough. It just, in my opinion, doesn't really work for the long-term viability of a center. You need to take a look at what is it you're actually allowing. The main comment I have, and Commissioner Alpert touched on this, I too don't have the acumen, or at least the confidence that I have the acumen to review this report, particularly page 7 with its financial findings. Those are conclusory comments. I don't know how you got there. My recommendation was, and I'm perfectly willing to go with what Commissioner Alpert is suggesting by bringing a consultant on board, and I would expect paid for by the applicants. But in the cities I've worked in, this is the job of the finance department. They take a look at revenue in and expenditures and who's paying what, and state law as it applies to various businesses and what their obligations to a city are. I would suggest that this study by Segway clean up some of the inaccuracies in it. It's 7 months old even now. I don't know that the vacancy rate is still the same as what they're talking about. I assume it might be. The numbers we saw tonight are probably accurate. But it makes comments about city center having an empty large amount of space at the ground level, which has been filled by Nike. It talks about 284 units being proposed in the marketplace, when in fact that's not the case any longer. So clean up the minor errors with our staff, and then submit the study again if you're still interested, but submit it to the finance department. I would look forward to a staff report in the future that includes a memorandum from the finance department taking a look at all aspects of this particular report. The data that was analyzed, the methodologies that were used, and the recommendations offered, particularly about the bottom line finances that the city can expect from a change such as is proposed. The last thing I'll say is I do not agree that this should be an administrative approval, because I don't have a lot of faith that when finances get tough, when vacancies go up for whatever reason, that we won't have repetitive uses or the kind of uses that Commissioner Edwards expressed some concerns about. I think it is the job of the Planning Commission on issues like this to be involved, to give the public a chance to be involved. And yes, it takes some time, and if there are ways to shorten that time period, I don't have a problem with that, but to exclude the Planning Commission and tell us that we can appeal any decision of the zoning administrator, to me is to relegate the Planning Commission to a position where it will be held somewhat responsible for what happens, and it will have almost no ability to influence what happens. So that aspect of the proposal doesn't work for me. And finally, there is one other comment. I think Commissioner Alpert is right. If we do it for one, we will have no good reason to not do it for all others. So we need to be careful. Yes, we're competing with online purchasing, but we are on the cusp of giving away even more retail space and making Foster City's retail base even less relevant than it is today to the residents of the city.
Thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
In general, I agree with the comments by my fellow commissioners. I have a slightly different viewpoint of certain things. I did read through the Sedway report, and while I don't pretend to be an economist, it clearly related to the city of San Ramon as a whole. But we're not talking about changing the city as a whole. We're talking about a very, very small portion of the city. And in that regards, what seems to me to be the bottom line for this particular proposal is found on page 40 of the report, which is our packet, page 174, where the bottom line really is, if we agree to change the retail mix on this space, yeah, the city will probably lose some revenue, but we will have a nicer looking shopping center and Federated will make more money. Now, I don't begrudge Federated making more money, but if we're doing changes to benefit a particular tenant, there needs to be some type of give back to the city. And I don't see this proposal really moving the ball on that one. I want to point out that the report that Sedway did, again, I'm not an economist, but it was made in 2021. As Commissioner Marks pointed out, the world has changed in several different ways since then. I think the most important for the purposes of this particular project is that the amount of population in San Ramon is likely to increase significantly over the next 20 years. Commissioner Marks pointed out BR6 has 400 houses approved. I'm a little bit more aggressive in terms of how many people that is. If you're buying a 2004 bedroom townhouse, you're going to have 4 or 5 people in that building. I think you're talking about 12 to 1,500 in that space. City Walk has been approved for 4,500 units. And yes, that's over a 20-year period, but that's still a good 12 to 15,000 additional people. So just on that alone, and what everybody is leaving out in a discussion of San Ramon is the impact on our revised housing element, because the largest group of new housing is going to be, probably will be, scheduled for the Bishop Ranch area. Now, I want to speak briefly about the much maligned North Camino Ramon specific plan, which I will take the credit or blame for being a part of. When we drafted the plan in 2012, City Center was intended to be a lifestyle, upper class center. That's exactly what it is. You have high-end retail, you have high-end opportunities for entertainment, and I do count field work in that area. But it was never intended to be a be-all, end-all for the central part of San Ramon. We originally intended the center of the Bishop Ranch area, which is the commons area, to have auxiliary services. Now, we've been told for years and years and years that retail is dead. I will have a comment on that in a minute. But that means that this particular shopping center is even more important because this is where people will go for their daily life needs, the grocery store. If you have a broken pipe, you go down there and get a pipe fitting at Ace Hardware. If your shoes need to be fixed, you go to Nick's. So this actually is a complement to what is done in City Center. And I think that it is important to keep it there because, as you recall, all our consultants have told us that the area along Crow Canyon Road on the east side of the city, in conjunction with Bollinger Canyon, will be the main thoroughfare for commerce in the city of San Ramon. But it will be different than Bollinger and City Center. It'll be more for ordinary people to do ordinary things. The other thing that I think has been left out in this report, because it should pertain just to the shopping center, is that the effects of, quote, leakage, close quote, of San Ramon to other neighborhoods as respect to this shopping center, to me, are overstated. The three areas in the reports, both BAE and this one, that indicate are growing areas are, first of all, building materials and garden equipment. Ace Hardware fits that category. There is no competition for Ace Hardware anywhere in the town except possibly Home Depot, and not even in our neighboring cities. Second of all, the other part that is growing is food and beverage. Sprouts is the successor to Lucky Stores in this shopping center. In 2 weeks, Nob Hill will be gone. And the only shopping center that has this decent sized grocery store east of Highway 680 will be Sprouts in this center, unless you want to go all the way out to where I live at the corner of Bollinger and Doherty Road. That means that this shopping center and the Sprouts will be the leading grocery store for everybody in east side of San Ramon, west of Al Costa and south of Crow Canyon Road. There aren't any others. Now, I walked around this shopping center and marketplace today. The thing that struck me about Crow Canyon Commons, besides its age, was the fact that there's only a 7% vacancy rate. That may be different on a national average, but 1 or 2% to me does not make a significant difference, certainly not worthwhile to changing our city standards. Second of all, the retail in the shopping, the non-retail is only 17%. That's still below the 25% trigger that would require them to come back to us for a use permit to have other non-retail services. This is a different way of phrasing what Commissioner Alpert said, but there's no urgency in the terms of this shopping center to make the changes they're looking at this point. The other point I want to raise has to do with the brick and mortar concept. Now, Commissioner Marks has pointed out the article in the New York Times. There have been a number of other articles that talk about the impact of the pandemic and whether that really means the end of brick and mortar. And what some of the articles suggest is this: if people don't commute to work in downtown Oakland or downtown San Francisco, but work from home, they are not going to be spending money at the bars and sandwich shops in downtown San Francisco or downtown Oakland, but they're going to be here. And as anybody who has worked from home knows, you got to get out of the house once in a while. And if you're going to do that, you're going to go to a local place here in San Ramon. And there has been a number of articles that have written that an impact of the pandemic on high-end neighborhoods that have people who can afford to work from home because they're in like the knowledge industry, they don't have to be cranking wheels at a car assembly place in Fremont, is that those people are going to need more local brick and mortar services, not less. Now, Amazon does wonderful things. I use it to get books, but I don't use it to go get a sandwich. If I want to get a 6-pack of beer, I go down to Total Wine to do that. I don't call up Amazon. So there's a whole raft of services as well as retail that could cater to what may be the local need in this area. So I agree with Commissioner Marks, Commissioner Albert, that it is inappropriate to study this level of changes for this small of an area in a specific plan at this point in time. I think as a larger subject, we have talked about in the past, the whole issue of what is a correct correlation between non-retail and retail at our shopping centers. And this obviously is a shopping center that figures prominently in that discussion. But at this time, I don't think the relief that's being sought by the applicant is appropriate for this commission on the record in front of us to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. And then I'm going to wrap up with my comments. And I have to say, thank you for your presentation and the report. Again, some of the report was very technical, and it is not in my area of expertise. But as with my fellow commissioners, I would like to just also say at this time, we probably don't have enough information to keep on going. But I'd like to raise my points from a slightly different angle. And that is, I do shop at this center, and so I spend a lot of time there. And I will say that one of the things that I find interesting is that there are businesses that are very robust and businesses that are a little less. And so, for example, if you go down by Pete's and you go by the Habit, you can hardly get a parking place. Panera Bread. I mean, that little nook there is very busy. So it's not necessarily just getting a business in, but it's also getting a quality business in. So for example, across the freeway is In-N-Out Burger. And I don't care what time you go past that place, there is a line. And so there are businesses that people want to shop at. I would suggest that Crow Canyon Commons, it would be a great place for a Chick-fil-A, because apparently wherever you have it In-N-Out, if you put a Chick-fil-A, they both do awesome. And the little section where Zachary's was, Zachary's and Starbucks and the cheesesteak place, that would make a great spot to be able to put in a Chick-fil-A. Likewise, I would, people mention the housing. One of the things that we seem to have an inadequate response to are families that are going to fill in this new housing. Hopefully some of it will be, we use the word affordable, but something geared more to younger families getting a foothold in housing in San Ramon that usually brings children. And we don't have enough areas and stores in which the needs of children are first and foremost. It was really disappointing to see in Danville where Boswell's, which has been there forever, lost their lease. Let's go get Boswell's, because that place was always busy. So maybe a party store, something like that. The other thing that San Ramon seems to really lack, and the Crow Canyon Commons used to have a lot of, or at least a few, was a place you could go dance and party and have an adult adventure in the evening. And like you want to just go out and have a good time, we don't have a place like that. Basically, we don't have any bars, at least nicer ones. You got to go to Walnut Creek or you got to go Pleasanton. I know, because we were shopping for one once. So so it's just some place like that. There used to be Max's used to be able to go and you could have a cocktail or something. We've really eliminated those kinds of businesses. We also don't have enough places where teens can spend their money. Yes, City Center does have places where teens like to hang out, but that's the nature of teens, but that could be recreated as well. How about a place where you could have open mic for young people who aspire to be in some performing field. So the other thing is that in this center, I will say that given the change in our demographics, the increasing population density of folks who trace their lineage to South or East Asia, is that the Crow Canyon Commons doesn't seem to really reflect anything that would market to that demographic. So those are a couple of things but just, you know, we do have a lot of housing that is coming into this area. Housing up at Faria. We've approved the units up off of Deerwood, the units off of Hooper. We've already heard about the City Walk. There's just a lot of housing that's coming online, and we don't have a shopping center. There's the little center there on San Ramon Valley where Mountain Mike's is, but that's relatively small. So yes, Crow Canyon Commons is the big footprint place, and I think it will actually hold its own in retail. I think, you know, what the city needs and what you're looking for as tenants might be a different discussion. But I also think that to the point taken earlier is like, yes, this is the place where, oh shoot, we need milk. I'm going to run into Sprouts or, you know, get something like that. So I think that there's the market for that. You know, a Papa Murphy's where you could buy the pizza and bake it at home. I mean, you know, there are simple things. Part of why we picked our house was because it was within a mile of Crow Canyon Commons, and that in raising kids was very, very convenient. And so I think there is still a market for that as I look forward, or I look down the road to how many new families will be coming into this area. And to your point, this is going to be a really important area for future retail and so forth. So I think at this point, you know, we've heard a lot of reasons from the other commissioners why they're not comfortable yet with this change in the number. But those are my comments, and I just thought it would be worthwhile to share it from more of a consumer point of view rather than just land use point of view. So hope that is helpful. Any last comments from any of us to wrap this up? I hope I also was able to add to my fellow commissioners' input to the applicant and to staff on this topic. But
yes, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
The applicant had some slides that they presented this evening.
Mm-hmm.
If they choose to come back, it would be helpful if we could receive those just as a way of summarizing their point of view for us to study the next time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, excellent. All right. So thank you to our applicant and to staff. We appreciate this. I'm going to, do you have enough information, everybody, to move on? I'm seeing a nod. So, okay, we will move on to, go ahead. I heard a voice. No,
I just said thank you. We do, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we are now at the liaison reports and other topics. So, do we have reports from our liaisons? The traffic did not meet, so yes, Commissioner Wallace.
I'm not sure whether this is a liaison report, but I do have a report on behalf of the ad hoc committee on the redo of our housing element, if you think this is an appropriate time to do so.
I do. I'm open to that. So yes, I think that benefits all of us.
All right. Commissioner Marks and I met with staff on Monday morning for 2 hours. Commissioner Marks and I received the package from staff on Friday afternoon. It contained several different what are printouts of spreadsheets, but as Commissioner Marks and I both noted, the font of them was so small it was virtually impossible to read without a magnifying glass. But we did go through the material at the meeting, and staff agreed to provide me with copies of the spreadsheets in the Excel format so that I could slice and dice and come up with some conclusions based on the data that they provided. Now, the good news is this. I'm going to walk you through what the analysis is at this point, but the bottom line, so to speak, is that the numbers that staff and the consultant have generated as applied to potential housing opportunity sites in our city would meet or exceed the RENA numbers, both in terms of the number of gross housing units we need, which is slightly over 5,000, as well as the affordable units, which is about 3,100. So I'm going to walk you semi-briefly through how the numbers were arrived at. The first tranche was the carryover of units that were listed in the 2014 housing element, otherwise known as the fifth cycle. Staff provided us for the Monday meeting with a detailed list of those units. There are 39 different parcels which have carried over from the fifth housing cycle for inclusion or potential inclusion in the sixth cycle. The estimated housing units that can be generated from those is 1,416. The more interesting number is the number of affordable housing units that can be generated by that particular tranche. Now, I was under the impression that when HCD looked at the number of housing units to qualify for affordable housing, and the fact that we had a housing inclusionary policy that required 15% must build, that we would need to have enough units in our inventory that a 15% must build would yield the number of affordable units. That's not the case. HCD uses a totally different methodology, which is some part mathematics and some, let's say, qualitative analysis. And so you don't have, for purposes of our affordable housing numbers, our inclusionary housing ordinance is basically irrelevant. What is important is the amount of density that you can put on the particular units. Based on the current numbers that were generated by our consultant and our staff, the leftover units from the fifth cycle can be counted to produce 1,128 affordable units, which is about a third of our RENA number. The second tranche that we looked at were potential housing sites that are new to the sixth housing cycle. A large percentage of those are located in the Bishop Ranch area. There, in fact, a number of them are immediately to the north of the City Walk area that we approved last year. Now, again, these are potential housing units, but based on the numbers we were given by staff and the consultant, the potential housing opportunity sites that would be included for the first time in our housing element would yield 3,524 housing units. Using the methodology that HCD will accept, staff and the consultant came up with a credit for affordable units from the potential new to the sixth cycle of 1,978 units. The third tranche, well, there's actually 3.5. The small tranche is our favorite subject, accessory dwelling units. And the staff has projected, based on our actual permitting of ADUs, that our sixth cycle can count 70 ADUs towards our RENA numbers, of which 35, half, will fit into the affordable housing bracket. The final tranche is what's been referred to as the pipeline units. These are projects for which approval has been given or is in process, but the building permits probably won't be pulled until after June 30th of this year, and therefore can be accounted for our sixth cycle. The pipeline units are calculated to produce 2,498 units, of which 575 will be affordable. Now, assuming I did my math correctly, the current estimate of units that we can blackboard, so to speak, to HCD for our gross units are 7,508 versus the RENA number of 5,111. More importantly, as against our RENA count of 3,126 affordable units, the numbers generated by staff and the consultant show we can tell HCD with a straight face that we can provide for 3,716 units, which is roughly 24% above the RENA numbers. And the consultant recommended that we have more units attributable to affordable housing than RENA requires in case ACD decides that some of our estimates are a little too aggressive. And as you probably know, the LA Times reported that HCD looked at the housing element proposed by Los Angeles and said, hey guys, you're short by 250,000 to 500,000 units. So that's why prudence suggests that we overestimate rather than underestimate. Now, at both of our ad hoc meetings, both Commissioner Marks and ourselves and myself had comments about which units should be included into the potential opportunity sites. One of them, and specifically the easiest to point out to you, is on San Ramon Valley Boulevard, just past the Crow Canyon Cinema. There's a shopping center that's anchored, so to speak, by Eric's Deli. I personally prefer the optometrist that I go to, but that's the anchor tenant. But in any event, that's what it is. And that is something that Rick and I are both concerned about sacrificing too much in the way of retail and secondarily commercial to the altar of providing housing. So the which units go in and which units go out is still in flux. And I know that I will go back through the spreadsheets that staff gives me to come up with a final list of what I want to discuss as to whether it's appropriate or not to be in our housing element as housing. And that leads me to my last point. The current schedule for the initial submission of the housing element to the public calls for that document to be disseminated around the end of April. And that date, as you may recall from our meeting earlier in this process, was that there are deadlines that are imposed by the state housing law that require certain things to be done by certain dates in order to give certain people certain time to look at stuff. Part of it is to allow the public to comment. Part of it is to allow HCD to do so. If we are to present to the public our current proposal, what that means is as follows. First, on March 15th, as you know from Mr. Barr at our last meeting, we have a joint meeting set with the City Council to discuss the housing element. As you know, the housing element requires an amendment to at least our general plan, which requires 3 meetings of the Planning Commission and the City Council. Having a joint meeting checks the box for both entities. But as you know, we also have another meeting scheduled on the 15th to deal with a subject called the El Nido House, which of course nobody ever comes to our meetings and talks about. So I'm looking at that meeting of maybe it's an hour, hour and a half we have with the City Council, but that's 10 different people, all of whom will want to say something. That's the only scheduled meeting of this entire Planning Commission that's set. The ad hoc committee is going to meet with staff on March 28th. But we as a group are not scheduled to go over this plan other than that one meeting with the City Council. I have told staff at our last ad hoc meeting that I don't think that that is a reasonable way to proceed, that I don't think that it gives the entire Planning Commission the time to comment on a large plan between the leftover units and those that are proposed for the first time in the 6th cycle. You are talking about 65 different pieces of property in the city of San Ramon that will be allowed for housing. And I don't think that the full commission has been given adequate time to discuss that prior to submission to the public. Because I think that once it goes to the public, our ability to make significant changes will be fairly small. So my recommendation to the commission is that they schedule a meeting with staff prior to submission of the report to the public at the end of April. And my recommendation is that they do so at the beginning of April to allow staff and the consultant to respond to comments we have and to produce a document that is consistent with what we want to provide to the public. This will also be after we've heard from the City Council on March 15th, and also after what should be very close to the final report that before it goes to the public at the ad hoc meeting on March 28th. So that's my report, and that is also my recommendation. Commissioner Marks may have some other thoughts because he sat through the meeting with me. But as far as me personally, that's my report.
I'm going to caution the commission. Commissioner Wallace gave his report, but we need to be careful we're not going too far in our comments and having both members speaking. Alicia, any concerns?
I think that just a brief update is good, but don't encourage any further commission discussion.
Madam Chair, I have no comments.
Okay, very good. So Debbie, can you help me out here? If this was an item we did want to have on a separate planning commission meeting, is that something that we can recommend to you tonight to find a scheduled time as Commissioner Wallace has suggested?
Actually, we have been working on the schedule based on, the comments with the work from our meeting on Monday with the ad hoc committee, but there's some other things that have come up in order to really, get this across the finish line. So after commissioner comments, Mr. Barr has the updated schedule for the commission to go over.
Okay. So staff, please understand that, yes, you have to work the schedule, but this is something that we do. I think I'm going to speak on everyone's behalf. I haven't asked them, but, we like to do due diligence and be able to look at things thoroughly. So, having our own separate meeting on this would be much appreciated. All right, Mr. Barr, take us home, buddy.
Okay, well, appreciate the commitment to the accelerated timeline. We are currently working on revising the schedule for the housing element study session on the 16th. We are looking to have a planning commission only meeting on the 16th, and then scheduling a special meeting at the end of March with the council and planning commission. That will allow the commission the opportunity to among themselves work through these issues that Commissioner Wallace has summarized, that will also be changing by the time you see this the next time. And that way come with a more complete project for discussion with the City Council in advance of the preparation of the full document. Again, the focus that we're looking at right now is the housing opportunity sites in particular, because they're at the heart of the whole program.
And that is March 16th, not the 16th, just to clarify.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
8th. Okay, good.
Yes.
Sorry, could you repeat that date again?
March 15th, Tuesday, March 15th, your regular meeting.
Okay, and so
it'll be an early start time. It'll be a 6 o'clock start time, just as we were scheduling before. And then there'll be a regular meeting with the continuation of the El Nido project. And then we also have Primrose Daycare returning as part of the regular session.
So I think what Commissioner Wallace was asking, so Debbie, the separate meeting that you're trying to put on the calendar, the date would be, you're hoping to be the 8th, March 8th.
No, it'll be, the commission will meet in a special session on Tuesday, March 15th at 6 o'clock or maybe 5:30. And then they will hold their regularly scheduled meeting at 7 o'clock that night. We'll bifurcate the items so that there's special attention paid to the housing element update.
Right, okay. But a separate housing element meeting is yet to be worked into it.
We're working on scheduling a second meeting at the end of March which will be a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and City Council.
So
And
the
that
second one.
second one at the end of March, right? And so we're trying to confirm dates and make sure that can work. But the idea is to again allow the commission the opportunity to work through some of these issues as a group, and then work jointly with the city council in advance of moving on to the final housing element.
If there's some flexibility in the start of the special meeting, my suggestion would be 5 o'clock.
Yeah, we can look at that.
We can take it into consideration.
Yeah, we'll see what the consultant's availability is and if all the commissioners, and we'll pull the commissioners outside this meeting to determine their availability also.
Thank you, because I know I really felt pressed for time when we were doing the joint meeting with the Housing Advisory Committee. And when we get the city council together, there's more talking, not less.
Okay. Anyway, I think that'll do it for now in terms of schedule. It's a evolving timeline.
So the 15th will be a busy day.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask a question. For El Nido, is it staff's intention to ask us for a go, no-go vote at that time?
Will not be Commissioner Wallace, that we will bring, that's not for discussion at this time. That's about a future project and it's not agendized. I'm sorry.
Okay, you don't have to apologize. I just thought I'd try and get some information ahead of time.
Can't do that.
That's right. Can't do it. Can't do it. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
One reminder for those of you who are joining me at the Planning Commission Academy on March 16th through the 18th. We have a great session planned and I will see you all there.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be walking there. So trying to embrace the walking district. So
we have a tour actually too. So
that's right. There is. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned at 8:48. Thank you one and all for your hard work. And, just staff, everybody, really appreciate it. This is a tough gig and you guys do a great job. So thank you. Keep up the good work and we'll see you on the 15th, if not before. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Right.
Nice.